All right. So, but let's now move on to the Chevron doctrine or deference doctrine, which is it's one of those things that is a little bit obscure, but impacts almost every single breath we take, everything that we put into our mouths, every place, every time we travel somewhere, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So here's my 2-second explanation of Chevron deference. Everybody understands that we have lots of executive agencies, right? The FDA, the EPA, all these agencies running around. All these agencies make rules, right, about what means clean water and whether or not we should have a vaccine and things of that, kind of nature, right? Why do people follow these rules? Because of this legal concept that was first articulated in a case involving the Chevron Oil Corporation. And the issue is that when a federal agency makes a rule, like the EPA, like the FDA, like the FCC, when the federal agency makes a rule, the courts should treat that rule with the force of law. It's why it's called deference, is because when something is a law, the courts are supposed to kind of try to assume that such law is real and constitutional and carries forces and effects, right? When justices talk about overturning Chevron deference, what they are talking about directly is ignoring laws made by the federal agencies and imposing their own will and interpretation of congressional statutes over and above what the federal agencies have said. So FDA says, we can't have a vaccine until certain targets are met. Court says, nah, we're not going to listen to that. EPA says, to have clean water, we need X, Y, and Z. Court says, no, we don't. Like that, the people who want to overturn Chevron deference, that's what they want to do. They want to superimpose a judge's or an appellate court's interpretation of law over the professionals in the executive agencies. That is why, and this is my last point here, that is why every person who even thinks they might care about climate change, whether you're a hardcore Green New Deal person or just a regular old person who has kids and want them to be able to grow up without sprouting gills. If you care at all about environmental regulation, then you deeply care about Chevron deference. Because if you don't have Chevron deference, then you don't have an EPA that is allowed to do anything. That is the one-to-one connection.
And so the idea is that when Congress makes a law, they don't know in the future what chemical somebody might find in the water that it causes neural damage, let's just say, as an example. So they leave it up. They leave a certain amount of it of birth to the EPA to determine, like, it's basically keep the water safe. And the EPA goes out and creates a grid to determine what keeps the water safe. We have this evidence that if you ingest this much of a chemical over the course of a certain time, then the water's not safe. But maybe if you have a little bit less, it is safe. There's no way for the Congress to actually do that every single day. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the time. They can't see into the future. And basically, it's the Chevron deference that allows the EPA to do that. The court doesn't care if they want to stop them from, like, hey, that's going to cost too much for that company to actually dispose of that chemical as opposed to dumping it in the river. Boom, that's it. And there's no, I mean, once the
so many of these,
like, how, like, there's no, is there even a way for Congress to fix that? Like they can fix it on that specific chemical, but I'm saying, is there a way for the Congress to sort of say, like, you've got to broadly apply that doctrine that you developed in the Chevron case?
It's hard to legislate Chevron deference, right? You could pass some kind of legislation that basically instructs the courts to listen to the executive agencies, but you'd have to kind of do that legislation with each law you pass, right? So you pass the Clean Air Act, and then you have to tack on, and this act will be interpreted according to the strictures of the EPA, blah, blah, blah. So you'd have to do that every time with every law. It is possible to overcome a court who does not respect Chevron deference, but it is super hard. And it means that, and I think in a more immediate sense, it means so many of the laws that we have already on our books become functionally useless, right? Like that's the real kind of immediate term effect. So like, yeah, you can pass a new Clean Water Act that reinstitutes Chevron deference for clean water, but you have to pass a whole new act, and we had trouble passing the first one, right? So it makes everything once again back into the political arena, and that's just bad for our health and safety. I focus on the EPA because I care about climate change, but I mean it's as simple as the Congress passing a law saying make sure planes don't fall out of the sky, and the the National Transportation Board making rules about how to make sure planes don't fall out of the sky, and then the court coming in and saying, "Oh, Boeing, you don't have to listen to those rules. That was just the Transportation Safety Board. You don't have to listen to them. Congress just said make planes safe. We think that whatever Boeing says makes planes safe makes planes safe." Like that, it goes to so many kind of basic aspects of our safety just running around the country.
And we should just make it clear. What it's going to mean is that how many of those planes have to crash before Congress realizes like, oh, we've got a problem now, and we have to pass another bill. And if not enough people die, there may not be the political will to do it.
And if we have divided government, if Congress is controlled by one party, but the Senate is controlled by a different party, and like passing new legislation takes a long time. We have Chevron deference to make our system efficient. And Coney Barrett is absolutely dead set against Chevron deference. She would join Neil Gorsuch, who is also absolutely dead set against Chevron deference. I think you still have Roberts, but it's part, again. There are long-term goals that the conservatives have with the Supreme Court, and they do not start and they do not end with abortion. Abortion is just the thing that they use when they need to get the crazies activated. They talk about abortion, but there is a whole smorgasbord of things that conservatives want that people like Amy Coney Barrett support.
Lastly, let me ask you this: what can be done now? I mean, is this a fait accompli? Or let me put it this way. It can be both a fait accompli, and there can be things that can be done that can at very least sort of set up a response to it. Does that make sense?
Yes. To me, it absolutely makes sense.
You and I, people understand what I just said.
Right. Because there is not a lot that can be done to stop Amy Coney Barrett in the immediate term. There's simply too much time left on the clock. There are delaying tactics and stunts. I think the Democrats should use them all. I'm actually disappointed that the Democrats are not more invested in using some stunts right now. There are delaying tactics and stunts that can potentially push her nomination back until after the election. But Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell have already indicated that they are willing to push this justice through a lame duck session of Congress. They're literally willing to have senators, some of whom may have lost their reelection bid, vote to confirm a justice who will sit on the court for 40 years. There is too much time left on the clock between the election and the inauguration to delay it all the way through to January 21st. I just can't get us there with parliamentary politics, right? So if they're committed to doing it in the lame duck, they will get it done in the lame duck. After that, if Joe Biden wins and is allowed to take office, which is a whole different problem, and is allowed to take office on January 20th, then the only thing the Democrats can do is expand the number of justices on the court. I've heard lots of interesting ideas. I know there's a bill in Congress right now about term limits. I love term limits. I think they're constitutional. I'm not on the Supreme Court. And the people who are on the Supreme Court do not think it's constitutional. Democrats think that they might be losing that 5-4. There is right now only one justice on the Supreme Court who has even indicated the possibility that he thinks term limits would be constitutional. That's Stephen Breyer. I think you lose a term limits case 8-1 in front of the Supreme Court right now. If you want term limits, you need to expand the court with justices who think term limits are constitutional. If you want statehood for DC, you need to expand the court with justices who think that DC and Puerto Rico can and should be states. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. There is nothing that you want that survives a court that's stacked 6-3 with Republicans. That's why Republicans stack the court, specifically to be a bulwark against the progressive agenda should they ever lose popular power. That is why they've stacked them. To overcome that, you must meet their game and raise them. You must expand the Supreme Court with your own slate of justices. That is the play. That is the only play.
And the point of gumming up the works right now, at the very least, there may be ancillary benefits to it as well. But the point of doing that now and pushing it into the lame duck is because them confirming a judge in the lame duck session, if these senators have lost and Joe Biden is the president-elect, becomes an even easier jumping board or springboard to court packing, to court expansion, and these other reforms, right? Exactly. I mean, that's bottom line. And so if you don't take the opportunity to gum up the works now, one of the reasons you may not do that is because you want to lessen pressure on you if you are in the leadership and in the majority later from actually making these reforms.
There's also just straight up the issue, we've touched on it already, but there's straight up the issue that delaying Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation until after the election means that that's one less vote to hand Trump the election.
Yep.
So it is absolutely worth it for Democrats to do everything they can to push the nomination till after the election, and I don't see them doing everything they can. I see them resistant to engage in really base and cynical political parliamentarian stunts. I understand that it might seem icky to them, but we are beyond icky. All right, we're in a knife fight to save our democracy. We got to bring everything that we have to bear, and that includes icky political stunts.
They got one job, and that's the job they should be doing. Elie Mystal, justice correspondent for The Nation magazine. Always a pleasure. I don't know if that was your kid back there, but we're cash here. It's okay. You don't have to worry about that.
Dude, homeschooling is a whole different.
I know. Thanks so much, Elie. Appreciate it.
Struggle is real. Thank you so much, Sam. Have a nice one.
You too.